At the studio with Kitchen Theory, we have Afroditi Krassa. Afroditi is a product and interior designer who studied at Central St. Martin's College and Royal College of Art before going on to open her own design consultancy, Afroditi Krassa Limited. Since then, she's worked with some of the world's most renowned chefs and hotel groups and bringing their spaces to life. Today, we're going to be discussing food art and design, multisensory design, and interior and multisensory kind of spatial design. I'm particularly interested in that. Afroditi, it's amazing to have you in the studio. Thank you so much for making the time.
It's a real pleasure.
You've been traveling all over. I've seen that from your Instagram feed. Where have you been most recently?
I've just come back from Hong Kong.
Ooh.
Just the day before things turned to worse, which was this weekend. So I just returned on Friday. Unfortunately, since I came back, a client in Hong Kong has told me things have just gone to a lot worse. That's the sad news. But we're working on an amazing project out there. So really, really inspirational to be out there and check out what's going on and meet with the client, see how the space is progressing. Very, very great trip.
And I've seen that you've been traveling to quite a few different kind of regions over the last year or so.
Yeah, it's been quite crazy. Since last year, we had a lot of international work and a lot of research abroad as well. Okay. So typically the studio would do most of our work within prime central London, within a very specific zone where all the restaurants are. You know, Mayfair, Soho, Covent Garden, most of our projects will be there. Easy for going on site visits. And in the last, it's been probably a year and a half now, we went out to Peru for an incredible...
Wow, I saw that you were in Peru.
Yeah, we're bringing a great brand from Peru to London called Osaka. They do Nikkei cuisine, which is this...
The Japanese Peruvian
mixture
fusion,
of Japanese with local Peruvian ingredients. So we went out to see the restaurant that the client owns in Lima, but also got to experience the best of what Lima has to offer in terms of food. They took us to anywhere from Virgilio Martinez's restaurant all the way to little canteens down a park, where they would do one dish only. So we got to experience amazing food and drink, actually, because they took us to some amazing bars as well. And we went to meet with great mixologists, people who make ice. It was so inspirational. And the project we're doing there is not in Peru. This was more of an inspirational trip. We're bringing this concept to London, but unless you really understand where it comes from, the culture and the history, you really can't understand it just by looking on the internet or reading about it or hearing about it.
Well, that's an interesting point. So because looking at the portfolio of restaurants and hotels that you've worked with, they've been really varied in terms of the chefs that you've worked with, their backgrounds, the inspiration, the stories, the kind of narratives that a lot of these spaces have.
Yeah.
How do you bring that into your kind of both the creative process, the design process? Does it vary an awful lot when you have a different type of chef
it varies.
Or cuisine to work with?
Yeah, it's a really great question. There's two things which are important. Three things actually. Firstly, we are so highly specialized in the design of food and beverage spaces that it's only logical that you would work across a completely different range of clients within that, because it's such a specific sector. And we don't do anything beyond that sector, that we end up working with anybody from a really casual fast food type of high street chain all the way to Michelin-starred restaurants. And that's the beauty of it as well, that you get to work across all these different areas and categories. The second thing is we don't have a studio style or signature way of doing things.
I noticed that with your design, it's very eclectic. The types of projects you've worked on.
And I'm glad you noticed, because it's actually what we want to bring out there as an output. We want the output to be always different and always unique to the project and always bespoke to the client and the project and the context. So we'll never repeat things across. It makes it harder for us, but I think it makes for a better project in the end for both us and our clients. So the way we approach things is similar, and the way we think about them is quite similar, and our process is quite similar. But imagine as a chef, you're a great chef, you can appreciate that. the final recipe is completely different. You know, you might start with similar ingredients, but you always cook them in a completely different way, if you were to use a cooking analogy. So we always start with a very immersive research process, which is quite differentiated from other design agencies, and it probably takes 5 times longer than other design agencies. So we never just look at things on paper or online. We actually spend days on end visiting places and locations. And I think there is nothing like real hands-on, going into a real space, tasting, smelling, touching, feeling what somebody does, whether a chef or a mixologist or whatever. You can't really experience that over a picture, over a piece of paper that describes it. You really have to go somewhere and feel the ambience and the atmosphere and then really experience that. And also, a specialist in food and beverage, that kind of enriches our understanding. And I think it works synergetically on other projects. So the minute we start a new project, we've got all this kind of backlog library of things we've seen on previous projects that we can cross-contaminate a new project with. And we might say to somebody, like a client, oh, have you seen this? We went to Peru and we saw that might be interesting for you. And it's a very collaborative and research-based approach to design, which I think makes for a richer projects in the end. Well, definitely a more pleasurable project for us. Nothing better than going out for some food and drinks.
So your work, just to give people a bit of an idea, the earliest work that I remember kind of when I first, because we got introduced, I think it was
at 100% design.
100% design is where
we
we were
gave
on a
talk
panel
together.
Yes. And I remember one of the
you
things
see,
that
the first day we met, we were doing something similar.
Yeah, there you go.
That's how our relationship started.
There you go. And it was, Charles was with us,
Yes.
Charles Spence.
Yes.
And I remember you and I kind of connected on the fact that both of us find his work really, really fascinating in terms of the multisensory psychology of both.
Yes.
As a chef, I find it fascinating, and I think you as a product and interior designer.
And I was obviously aware of what you've been doing.
Yeah. And some of the earliest work I remember was you had worked with, or that I am aware of, is the work that you'd done with Itsu.
Yes, that was my first project.
Oh, was it?
Yes.
So what was because you had done the branding as well with
I did pretty much everything for it for a continuous 5 years run, and since then kind of on and off ever since then. So that's an amazing first kind of project. Like what a cannot
great
complain.
Project to,
amazing
work
project
on.
And amazing also. There's no great project without a great client and a great team.
Sure.
Not my team. I'm talking the client's team. So I approached Julian Metcalf with a handwritten letter to tell him how much I admire what he does, because I think he's really a visionary and what I call a salmon, somebody who always swims upstream when everybody else swims downstream.
Oh, that's why your newsletter is called the
exactly.
Salmon. Got it.
And I call these people the salmons because they always think differently. And although he operates in very commercial, kind of spaces, he effectively started with Pret, which is, a sandwich shop. He would always approach things completely different to everybody else. And I wrote this handwritten letter to congratulate him. And literally a couple of days later, it's a classic anecdote. I've said that to so many people now. I got a call. I had a really dodgy studio down in Battersea, which was an ex-car park, with almost no natural light, really rough and ready kind of first designer studio where I would make my prototypes and test things out, and it would cost me £60 a month, which was a bargain. And I suddenly get this call, and this lady said, oh, hi, I'm Julian Metcalf's PA. He got this letter and he would like to meet you. Are you available tomorrow? And I thought somebody's having a laugh at me. I was like, what? Really? I thought it was a joke. I thought one of my friends is making a joke on me. She said, yeah, can you come tomorrow? I said, yeah, I'll come in tomorrow. So I turned up the next day, literally had no idea whether I'm meeting Julian or not. It just felt so easy. And he turned up and we started chatting, and I explained what I do. And he said, oh, I've got this new concept. Do you want to come and I'll show you the site I'm trying to take on?
What was the first site?
The first site we did was Vogue House on Hanover Square, just
I
off
know
Regent
that one.
Street.
Right, okay.
A tiny, tiny site, 35 square meters front of house, and another, 15, 20 meters back of house. And he said to me, this is my idea. I'm not a restaurateur. I don't want to do restaurants. He had a sushi, this kind of, what's the name? the conveyor belt
Conveyor belt,
sushi restaurants called itsu. He said, I don't want to continue with that. I'm not a restaurateur. I want to take what's the product, but turn it into a pret, turn it into a lunch offer and turn it into a shop. And I was like, okay. He said, do you want to come on board and help me do it? I said, I've never designed anything like that. I'm a trained product designer. I can design products. I can design telephones. I can design cars. I cannot design a space, a shop, a restaurant. I have no idea. He said, don't worry, you've got 8 weeks. Go and prove yourself. I was like, okay. And he literally showed me the site and he said, you've got 8 weeks, prove what you can do. And within that space, I had to learn how to design logotypes. So I designed the first version of the itsu butterfly, which is still in place. It has never changed. I designed all the packaging. I designed the uniforms. I designed the space. I designed the front, the shop front. Whatever was needed designing, he would say, yes, he would say to all the suppliers, speak to Aphroditi, she will give you the drawings. And I literally had to learn on the job.
I love those stories.
It was the toughest, most challenging 8 weeks, but also, when you're...
At that point, did you have a team?
No, it was me, and I had an intern who was interning, and she was helping me out. And I was under 30 years old, so I had tons of energy, and I would literally not sleep all night and just work my way through night.
Wow.
And the contractors would call me and say, what kind of RAL is a way to specify color for interiors. What RAL number do you want this metal to be in? And I would say, what is that? I have no idea what you're talking about. It was a whole new language for me. And cut a long story, the shop opened. And it did really well. The first week, it took 25,000 a week.
Wow.
And Julian said, okay, we've definitely got something here. And he said, do you want to come on board and become the creative director to help me expand it? And that's the genius of this guy. He trusts himself and he trusts his team. And that's why his restaurant empires have become so successful. He's very good at giving chances to young people and trusting them, but also trusting his own intuition and collaborating with somebody who's inexperienced. So I said, yeah, I would love to. It was the most amazing opportunity. Spent 5 years solidly, took itsu from 0 sites to 30 in 5 years. And then in around 2008, I said to him, I love what we do here, but I can't spend the rest of my life just purely working on it, so I have to do other stuff. Yeah. So I set up an internal team for itsu who was able to take on the day-to-day. Yeah. And now I just go in to help when they need a kind of creative push or when there needs to be a rebranding or a repositioning or a rethinking of the original work pretty much. So we've been working on and off for...
And so was that your kind of entrance to food? Is that what kind of got you bitten by the bug? And that's,
I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I realized this was my calling because...
Did you ever think before, had you ever thought about working with food before?
Never. I mean, my training was very much what I call hardcore industrial design. I had to design things like watches for Casio and cameras for Minolta and phones for Nokia and cars for Jaguar and airplane interiors from Concorde. It was proper, hardcore, mass-produced items. And when I set up my business, I thought this is what I'll be doing. And then when I met Julian, he completely changed my career, my future, the way I looked at design. And the bit that I loved the most about that industry was the speediness and the fact that you would do a sketch one day and in a few weeks' time, you will see it getting built, and you will see people interacting with your design live, like in front of your very eyes.
Ah, right.
Which you didn't get in product design because, let's say you designed, I don't know, a phone. First of all, it would take 2 to 3 years before it would hit production. It's the process is so much longer. And you don't necessarily sit and see people watching your phone and using your phone in the same way you experience a restaurant. You go in and you literally see what works, what doesn't work, how people respond to it immediately, and how it changes the way they feel, the way they enter, the way they navigate, the way they sit. You really get that very specific connection to people. It's very human-centric.
You get to watch the user experience and get to see how it all plays out.
The experience and the human-centric nature of food and beverage is what attracted me. And the fact that it was fast-paced. You worked with really great creatives, chefs, people who photograph food, people who create music lists for spaces. So you work with a lot of very interesting other creatives, and all of that really, really attracted me. Plus, being Greek, by nature, I love food. You know, food is so central to the way you're raised. I think, you know, I was raised with a mother who was a solicitor, and she would always say, oh, I should have opened a restaurant. I don't know why I've done this boring job. Solicitor is, you know, so dull. And, you know, we were always raised with an experimental kind of creative cook was our mom. And food was always very central to our family. And, you know, and I've always thought if I wasn't in design, I would probably be in food in some way or form. You know, that would have been my second career.
I always knew I wanted to work in food. And it wasn't until after I went to university and graduated a couple of years after that I actually realized that my calling was being a chef.
Really?
But I had always known I wanted to work in food and hospitality.
In some way or form. Yeah, I think it's such a passion-driven industry as a whole.
I think you kind of have to be in a way to work in it,
and that's what attracts me. You meet people who are really, really passionate about what they do. It's not a corporate world, it's a non-corporate world. People are really into what they do, and no matter who they are, from the very, very, young people to the more experienced, people are very, very passionate about people, about experiences, about food. Yeah. For me, it was the perfect combination. And things that I love, design and the food industry was the perfect combination.
And talking about experiences, one of the other earlier projects that I remember that you worked on was the Perfectionist for Heston.
Yes, and that's where I came across your work and Charles's work,
right?
Because I met with Heston. He had, I remember this first day I met him, this gadget that was making, using liquid nitrogen, and was creating a smoke that would enhance your experience of a drink. He was experimenting.
Right.
And he said, oh, try this out. And he gave me some, was it cognac? I think it was cognac. So he gave me some cognac, and then he made me smell this thing that was making this dry eye smell. And he said, now have it after you smelled this. And I was like, oh, wow, it tastes completely different. And he said, yeah, I work with Charles. And he explained what Charles does. And I have to say, before Heston, I knew nothing about this. And then I started researching, I started reading, I came across your work as well. And I thought, my God, this is like another world. It was so fascinating. And then I guess my geeky side came on board. You know, my father's side comes from a family of scientists and doctors. And I was always curious to understand how things work, you know. And this felt to me like almost like a revelation of the science behind how we understand flavor. It was almost like mind-blowing when I started reading. I thought, oh my God. And it still shocks me that not so many people know about it, that it's not kind of common practice. I always tell people you should check the science of gastrophysics. You should check Charles' work. You should check the kitchen theory's work, and everybody gets so fascinated, and it surprises me that not so many people know about it.
Well, it's interesting. We've at Kitchen Theory, we've kind of ridden the wave of a swelling interest in multisensory experiences generally, but it is always interesting. I particularly find with chefs and in culinary schools that there isn't more of this being taught.
Yes.
I think on that side, I think marketing, PR, and brands are
picking up on it. I agree.
But I still think that there's a lot that could be done with chefs. I think it's more than anything, it's not about kind of bringing more science into an experience. It's more just being able to allow people to kind of broaden their understanding of what they're offering their guests at the table.
But also improve everyday practice, you know, like really improve and develop everyday practice. It doesn't need to become a pop-up experience, as most people are experiencing it now. To me, it needs to be integrated into improving how we do things, because we have a better understanding of how we do things. You know, if you understand, for example, I remember after meeting Charles and you, I said to itsu, which takes us back to the start of my career. I went back to Julian and I said, you know, there is this whole sector of science which is specializing in understanding and explaining this side of the world. And he said, oh no, my God, I've never heard of that. And I said, imagine if, we find the right material for the teacups that we serve our tea in, like not just any paper cup, we really find what's the right material for experiencing the itsu tea. He said, my God, it's fascinating. And he called Charles in to see whether we can collaborate. And to me, that's where it becomes really interesting, where it's not about a new experience, but it's another layer on the practice of designing or creating the spaces, which is more informed and kind of enhances or improves everyday practices. If we had the right paper, the right material, which comes out of science rather than me saying, oh, that looks and feels right. And if that improved the experience, or if we could reduce sugar taking because of that, this is kind of liberating in my head.
Yeah, definitely. You mentioned something that, I know you touched upon it before, but it's this idea of being able to work with people from so many kind of varied backgrounds and disciplines.
Yeah.
And how, I'm guessing, I've seen this in the restaurant industry, the amount of kind of cross-disciplinary collaborations that are now going on compared to, let's say, 15, 20 years ago. You didn't have chefs really working with people from so many other disciplines, but now chefs are going out and working with people in music and art and design.
Yes.
Have you found, how has that kind of transformed the process of what you do?
In many ways, it makes it more complicated in terms of orchestrating everybody. That's the reality, the physical reality, and trying to create a cohesive and continuous story and narrative and concept that you're creating. So it requires a better understanding of how to creatively direct as a designer, because in all our projects we will be the creative lead who will orchestrate and lead the rest of the creatives, whoever they are and wherever background they come from, minus obviously the chefs. They're guiding us, and then from that we take on and lead everybody else. So on a practical level, it makes it more complicated. We now sit on teams of, to set up a single restaurant of 12 to 14 people. And I've got clients who are startups, and they're like, really? Do we need that many people? I'm like, yes, you do. And it makes it a bigger investment, a bigger project. But at the same time, in the how many years? In the 17 years I've been running the studio, I've seen already the transformation that this industry has gone through in terms of how competitive it has become and how much design and experience has become much more central than it used to be 17 years ago. So everybody has to up their game, and that results in stronger, better concepts, no doubt about it.
So how does that experience part, because as I said, we've ridden that wave of that. Yeah. There's a huge growing interest in experiences.
Yeah.
And restaurants in London, I've always kind of had this thought that there are lots of restaurants where, quite frankly, if you sat people in a white room, white table, white chairs, and just gave them food from some really great restaurants, it would lose an awful lot of its feeling, or lose a lot of the enjoyment that you get from the food. Yeah. Going on the opposite end, which is designing experiences that are cohesive and really enhance that food experience. How has that changed how we design restaurants now? How are we designing restaurants these days in a way that maybe we weren't doing 10 years ago?
I see your question. I can understand what you're trying to ask. I think when I first started, it would come, designing restaurants was purely an architectural exercise. So typically it would be either an architect or an interior designer. And let's take as a great example.
That's what I mean. You're not an interior designer.
No.
You design experiences.
Yes.
So what's the difference?
What is the difference? That, you're dealing with, it's multidisciplinary. So you're dealing with a whole load of different elements that need to come together. It's not just the spatial arrangement, it's not just the materiality, the color, the look and feel, the size of the table, the size of the chair, which is what an architect or an interior designer would deal with traditionally. You need to encompass the whole sensorial experience from beginning to end. What is the smell? What is the sound? What is the ambience? What are the lighting levels? how does the menu look like? How does it feel like when you lift it? How does it cover your face or not cover your face when you lift it up to read it? Do you still see the person opposite you? So it's I guess the closest to something like that would be designing a theater set or a film set where you have to take all these different, it's audiovisual, it's not just materials, you know, you need to take all these different elements and compose them. So I was talking to my team yesterday, interestingly, we went out for some research, and then I sat with them and I said, have you guys been to the River Café? And they're all young, you know, they're under 30, and they were like, no. We looked at it in pictures, but we don't see why we should go. And this is how restaurants were designed in the 90s. I mean, I love the River Café. It's designed by an architect. It's got a very strong architectural language, which is, I absolutely love it for that. But there is a new audience.
But you have to be able to appreciate that, let's
Sorry?
say. But you have to be able to appreciate that, let's say.
Yes, exactly. And also there is a new audience that will not find that at all attractive in many ways, you know, and this is partly why the world has changed. The world of restaurants has changed, and this audience is looking for a much richer experience. It's not just about the space and how great it looks and how beautifully laid out the tables are. It's about the whole, you know, what is the story? Where am I going to be transported to? And I think
that's a great word.
And I think one of the people who've captured this the best in the industry on a casual level basis is probably Dishoom, and I think Dishoom's success is because, in my opinion, they do great food, great service. That's a given. Everybody has to do great food, great service. You can't exist without that. That's a given. But they actually transport you. It feels like a cultural experience. You go in and you feel like, it sounds like you've gone to the theater. You've learned something. You felt engaged. Your senses were all tingled with on all levels. You know, there's an interesting smell. Alan Yao used to do that. You know, you would go to a busaba and there would be these little incense sticks and the lighting was different. It transported you. And you know, I think this has now progressed to a point where it's getting perfected more and more and more on a daily practice because everybody has been suddenly asked to raise their game. Our most recent launch in London was for Gordon Ramsay. We did this project called Lucky Cat on Grosvenor Square, and it's a classic example of somebody who's a great chef, comes from a back of house background, you know, like Gordon. You know, actually, I met somebody who said Gordon is the master of back of house. Yes, but I don't think traditionally this type of people, although they would get great designers and they would be interested in design and interior design and creating this holistic experience, I don't think they would get literally to write a brief which is more about the whole experience because it wasn't part of the vocabulary. And I think Lucky Cat is a good example that even the more traditional type of chefs are now moving on to a more experiential positioning because the whole market has moved. You know, you go to Lucky Cat and it's open till late, it's got a DJ coming in. It's not just about great food, great service, you know, it's not about great people in the kitchen experimenting and finding great ingredients and putting them together. It's beyond that now. And to me, it shows how the industry has really transformed. It's a good example.
Well, when you were talking there, it kind of reminded me of this idea, because I feel with what we do at Kitchen Theory, when we design events for brands, that we're really in some way in a business of designing Instagrammable moments for people. And when you were talking about your team, what restaurants they want to go to or that they find interesting, a lot of this does come down to now what people see socially, what their friends are sharing, and how attractive a place or a space looks, or how kind of engaging and exciting it looks to be, and as opposed to just having great food, great service, as you said, which in a way in a city like London have to be a given. What is beyond that? And I feel that one area of restaurants that have really, the bar has been kind of continues to rise is bathrooms. Right? If you think about bathrooms in restaurants 20 years ago, they're nothing like bathrooms in restaurants today. There's so much more of a focus on having these kind of great spaces that are in, and I'm not just talking about kind of really amazing high-end restaurants. I'm even talking about smaller eateries that will do really nice, unique little kind of elements in there. So I remember going into this one place in Brighton, tiny little eatery there. And you go into the bathrooms, and they had basically wallpapered it with something like Beano comic strips or something like that.
Great.
And it was just the fact that the amount of detail they had gone into that you thought, oh, this is really cool. And you think everything on from that end of it to, let's say, Sketch.
Of
that
course.
has those probably the most Instagrammed bathrooms I've ever seen.
Yeah.
I'm sure there are people who just go there just to Instagram themselves in the bathrooms. So what's the...
Sadly,
what's,
yes.
Yeah, sadly, yeah. What are the other, let's say, hidden parts of a restaurant that you don't think maybe, or that should be, that haven't been fully exploited yet, or that could be? Because we've opened up kitchens, right?
Yes.
And now the chefs have come out into the front. There are bathrooms. We've kind of done something like that. What else could we do?
Hidden parts. I'm trying to think. Is there a hidden part anymore for any restaurant?
What about
all the back of
entrances?
houses, all the back of houses become front of house.
It has, yeah.
You sit inside the kitchen now, and you have kitchen tables, which are amazingly designed, and you have these beautiful kitchen table experiences. Again, kitchen tables, they always existed. They were never extremely nice. They were great experiences because you're next to the action, but they were never well, I don't think 20 years ago they were beautifully designed. They were just more functional.
I think the novelty was to be in the kitchen.
The fact that you're in the kitchen. Well, now they're in the kitchen, but they look also amazing.
Yeah.
You've got
uniforms?
You mean of the whole thing, not the spaces? Okay.
No, what's
I think
kind
uniforms
of in restaurants, what could we do to really... what's the maybe...
I went yesterday, I'll tell you a tiny thing. There's always small things. I went yesterday to the Standard Hotel. We were very lucky. We were given a tour of the whole hotel. And then we went to the Double Standard, which is their take on a pub. You know, it's a very nice space. It's very casual, very approachable, very beautifully designed, very beautifully detailed. And we sat at this table, me and my colleagues. And then we put our hands under the table, as we do, being designers, being restaurant designers. And we normally cover the underside of our table with felt to help with acoustics. That's our go-to, you know. And also it feels soft. If you put your hands, you feel something nice and tactile. If you are wearing a skirt and you're, you know, a short skirt and or shorts for a man, and your knees touch, your skin touches, it's got a nice quality. You're not touching some horrible ply and screws, and you know it catches on your trousers, and you've just destroyed your nice pair of trousers. So that is normally what we do. We touched this, and it was actually the same exact expensive wood finish as the top of the table on the underside of the table. Wow. Not only that, it was beautifully shaped, like almost like an airfoil design, almost like the section of an airplane wing. Yeah. And we were like, wow. And one of my colleagues said, why do you think they've done that? I said, I have no idea. It obviously doesn't serve a functional purpose. It's not going to give the table a better structure or anything. And I'm sure my take on this is that they wanted, a bit like the bathroom, to say to the customer that we've given love to everything that you see, but also the thing you don't see. And then the person who gave us the tour arrived, and she took us to the tour, and she said, you know what? It's one of the only places I have to represent it from a PR perspective where the inside of the bar, the back, you know, all the equipment are in exactly the same finish, the same quality finish as the front. You usually spend, you know, you make a bar, you usually spend all this money, make the front look great, and then you look at the side and it's all this terrible equipment, a different floor finish because of the, what's the name, building control. They tell you have to use specific finishes. And it doesn't look as nice. And I think what's happening now is, in order to convince our customers who come in that we have taken care into everything we do, we literally have to design everything that's on show and hidden. Even if you don't see it as a customer, this is what, you know, amazed me with the Standard. We all have to up our game to the point where you have to design even the bits a customer would never see, but might touch, like the way we've touched the underside of the table. Yeah. And I think If I look at uniforms, I think a lot of people did amazing uniforms many years ago. I remember going to Hakkasan when it first started, and the uniforms were beautiful. Menu design done, lobbies, toilets, back of house, front of house, PTRs, private dining rooms, lighting, sound, smell. I've worked with so many people. I've seen everybody doing all of these things better and better and better. But I think the next level is to almost design the things that you don't even see, that you might just experience once in a blue moon as a customer. I think subconsciously, do you remember in the past people would say, oh, if you go to restaurant's toilet and they're dirty, it tells you how dirty the kitchen is. And to me, the underside of the table is going to become the same as the toilet, that if you're not loving every part of what you do, it means that the things that you've got to hide. And it's that transparency and that honesty that people are looking for.
And the devil in the detail, I guess, as well, right?
Exactly.
Because I was looking at what you did at Lucky Cat, and I think it was even little things like the holders for the chopsticks and stuff like that. You had
which
these
get
lovely
stolen.
Little cats. Right, yeah. I think
I've stolen some myself.
Isn't it Sexy Fish or something that have on them, on the back, it's got something like stolen from Sexy Fish.
Yes. I think that was a touch of genius. We didn't do that. It's only branded with Lucky Cat, but I have to say Sexy Fish, that was a touch of genius.
Yeah.
Because, it is that memento. Conrad did it with Quaglinos. Do you remember the ashtrays? Back in the good old days when you could smoke in a restaurant, the ashtrays had a price tag. So
really?
Because people started stealing all the Quaglinos ashtrays. They were designed bespoke. They had a queue. From top view, it was the queue of Quaglinos.
Right.
So people started in the 90s stealing them. And then they ended up putting a price tag. I thought, again, touch of genius. What I'm trying to say is these are not completely new things. It's just that as we progress with what we do, all of us as an industry, we're getting to develop all this thinking more and more. And rather than it happening almost ad hoc and by accident, now it's a bit more controlled.
So for years, I've been I've had in my mind that the future of restaurants, and I still believe that this is going to be the way, so if you think about, I guess 100 years ago, it was all about the maitre d', right?
Yes.
And the maitre d' would come out and flambe your crêpe Suzette or toss your Caesar salad or make your beef tartare. And then we kind of moved on to an era where it was all about the chef.
Yes.
We're still kind of in that period, and then kitchens opened up. And it was all about the chefs taking center stage. It wasn't just kind of who was behind those doors. It was about the chef being out there. You wanted to see them preparing your food and get as close to the action as possible. And you kind of sit there and think, well, what's the future of restaurants? And I think, for me, at least the way I see it, part of it will be less focused on this kind of maverick individual chef and more about these amazing collaborative projects where you have an amazing designer and a chef and a musician or a psychologist or an architect and a designer coming together. And I think it will matter as much the design, the music choice, as much as the food and the drinks menu. And I think all of these elements will come to be what makes a great restaurant. It won't be enough just to have this great chef or to have this great sommelier and team. It will be about having all these different amazing disciplines
coming together
and experts coming together and designing experiences.
But
and you're
also
kind of already doing that, right? Because I'm thinking of some of the more recent projects that you've worked on. And
I think, yes, we definitely do it. But I think not just us, pretty much everybody's already kind of moving towards that.
But I mean, as a design studio, you're kind of almost partnering with
we are, absolutely. And
restaurants. And so it's rather than it just being hired for a project. No, this is very much a collaborative project.
Collaborative process. And I don't think we're the only ones. I mean, we, for example, took a couple of years ago, equity in a project that, we participated. I'm a shareholder, I'm friends with the chef and the other shareholders, and effectively myself and my team are vested in the whole project, and not in a supplier chain kind of scenario where we just supply a service, but we're part of the founders team. The chef came up with the food, The other founder came up with the overall concept. I came up with the brand and the design and my team. And this is how this will grow. Whether we do one site or 20 sites tomorrow, it will grow as a collaborative project. And actually, when we did that, I remember there was a lot of interest from the press in these collectives, rather than a team or a chef, as you said, is more of a collective now. And it's not just, I have to say, I don't think it's just in this industry. It's across many industries where it's becoming about collectives of great people coming together.
Yeah.
You would see that in the digital world, in other worlds as well. So it's not just in our sector.
We've seen it even in academia and
Exactly.
education, and that tends to moves a little bit slower.
Yeah.
But
100%.
we've seen there's now a real appetite and appreciation for bringing, if you want to learn how to take your discipline further, the best way is to actually work with people from other disciplines and to look at how together you can kind of forge a slightly new way.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And to me, that's also what's fascinating about every single project, because no matter what we're working on, I always try to think, who else can we bring on the team to enrich what we do, to enrich our knowledge? Sometimes it might be a great artist, for example, or a great illustrator, or a great music person. Or, for example, we're designing a new coffee chain that will launch internationally, with the first location being in Luxembourg for a big operator. And I said to them, you know what? I really think for what you guys do is really important. You have amazing music. It's not always very important, but for this concept, it's extremely important. And I remember speaking to the client, and he said, oh my God, it's almost like you've read my mind. That's exactly what I've been thinking. And I said, okay, don't worry, we'll add it in what we will do, and we will need to go out there and find somebody who has a really great approach to music and can do something really special with this. And to me, that's always a challenge, because and the interest in every project, there will always be something new for us to learn, or somebody new to work with. It might be a great, all sorts of different people. And that's what keeps every project different and interesting, in my opinion, because you always have something to learn. And I always used to think a project has to either teach me something new, or I work with great people, or I make an awful lot of money. If it's none of the above, or at least two of the above, then I shouldn't be taking a project on. If it's only one of the above, sometimes it's not enough, It's not enough to get a project that's just well paid. It's not enough to get a project where the team is great, but you don't learn anything new, you're not challenged. It has to combine a couple of things for us as a studio, and to me, learning is definitely one of the top things. If we can learn and advance, this is a massive bonus.
And I've seen that you design some beautiful products.
Oh, yes.
So as we're talking, we'll show some of these on the screen.
Oh, really? Okay,
but,
great.
What inspires the kind of products that you design? Why do you select certain pieces?
Yeah, that's...
Where does that come from? Because I can see how it fits into, very clearly, how it fits into the overall work that you do at the studio.
Yeah.
But why do you select certain pieces? What is it
that
makes you want to still be designing these lovely products?
God knows is the answer. I'll tell you why we do it. That's an easy one to answer. I think once a product designer, always a product designer. I can't get this out of my system. And my mom always says, I cannot get used to what you do now. To me, you're still a product designer, And I think there is something about designing products which is, as a process, quite different to designing spaces. And I still very much enjoy it. And we're a very small team. We're only 9 people. And 4 out of the 9 are product design graduates, funnily enough, or product design trained designers. And I think when you study product design, you approach things in a very problem-solving way. You are there to solve problems. This is the way you're trained to think. And I still enjoy that process very much. And in the past, I was always frustrated because I was given a brief from a client of what to solve. And the AKollection, which is what you're referring to, was a way to solve what I want to solve without anybody telling me, because effectively it's our own brief and we can design whatever we want. We don't need to rely on this financially either. If it sells, great. If it doesn't sell, it doesn't sell. And the way we come about with the briefs is, as we design restaurants, we think, what are the products that are missing in the industry and what is the thing we would love to have that doesn't exist? And then we go about and design it. So for example, it always nagged me that we couldn't find bar stools that are small enough and comfortable and swivel. If a swivel bar stool swivels, it's usually really big, clunky and ugly, because it's usually kind of American standard, because they usually have swivel bar stools in the States rather than in Europe. If they're not swiveling, I find them that ergonomically they're not right. If you have a proper bar stool with 4 legs, it's very hard to get in and out because you can't rotate. And also from an operational perspective, it's very hard to clean around them. It's very hard to move them about. So it becomes a nightmare. But they're usually smaller and more compact, and that's important, especially when you design in small, constricted spaces like London. And they're usually not as comfortable. So this was the latest thing we did. We thought, if this is missing, we'll design it. So we went about to design it. And talking of collaborations, we've got this company out in Spain called Misana, who designs really nice furniture, and we usually specify their products for our restaurants, for our spaces. And I said to them, you know what? We've got this idea. If we design it, will you produce it under our name? And they said, yeah, great, sounds amazing. So I approached them. We initiated the collaboration, and that's how the latest product was born. We called it the Athens stool, just because it looks a bit like an Athenian column. You'll probably understand that once the picture goes up. And that's how it happens. It happens organically. And the great thing is we've got no brief. When we realize there's something missing, or when we've designed something which we think, that's interesting, let's take it to a wider market, it kind of almost happens as a symbiotic thing. And the great thing is we don't need to worry if it goes well or not well, because it's really something we enjoy doing. And if it does well, great. If it doesn't do well, so be it. We had fun doing it, And I think it keeps the team also sharp, because they enjoy having a break from doing the quite real commercial pressurized work and doing something which is a bit more hands-on, more experimental. There's no real pressure of deadline. And it feels a bit of like a break from the day-to-day, really hardcore, pressurized type of work that we do.
Yeah, I guess in a similar sense, that's how we feel about our chef's table and the menu. So for us, that's just pure creativity and enjoyment, and we get to do what we want. And it's not about a client brief. It's not about meeting any kind of preconceived outcomes or ideas. It's just about designing what we want to and putting together great dishes and kind of unhinged creativity.
And I'm sure as well for you and the team, for your team, it must be a great way to get your creative juices flowing without worrying, have I satisfied some brief? Have I ticked the box? Have I hit the deadline? Because it's very much driven by you. So it's a good practice, I think, to have that in any studio, in any business, not to have the constant day-to-day real job, to have almost like a hobby type of work that allows people to let their hair down and think in a different way.
So you mentioned about designing for spaces in London tend to be a bit kind of restricted. How does that change when you design for different regions? I mean, that's a very good point.
That
London
is,
obviously
oh my God, it's so weird that.
But when you're designing for different parts of the world, how does that change the approach? I mean, space in London obviously is one thing, but what are there other elements?
Of course, really there is cultural elements. There is the understanding of privacy. There is religion. There's so many elements. It's fascinating.
Privacy is an interesting one, because I have to say, in London, or in the West generally, I would say compared to in the Middle East, the spaces between tables is way bigger. Like in the UK, you can almost feel like you're sitting on the same table as someone, and that's absolutely fine. You get it doesn't matter. It's absolutely fine. Whereas in the Middle East, you would expect way more space between tables.
Our first international project was in Kuwait for a really lovely restaurant group out there. And Kuwait is an interesting market because There is obviously not a very strong drinks culture. It's non-alcohol. So food is very, very central. It's a way to entertain, mingle, get to see people relax. So it's actually quite a buoyant food scene. And we went out there and the client said it's really, really important that for religious reasons, privacy is highly respected here. And it's very, very important that people should have not a space between one to the next table, but certain tables should be completely out of sight or really, really private for people who want to have a much more intimate experience. So that was the first time we kind of had to realize that there's this cultural, local nuances that we need to understand. We, as I said, I just came back from Hong Kong. We're doing a massive space out there. It's 1,200 square meters of a restaurant. It's a monster for London standards. These are like 3 restaurants put together. And although the space is so big, I think we have about 300 covers in total. In London, we would have had 6, 7, I don't know how many, like much more. And we did a design, we showed it to the client, they approved it, they signed it off. And now I met with them and I said, we've done a dense version of your plan where we've put a lot more covers, almost like we would design it in London. And they said, why have you done that? We don't need that. We've got plenty of covers. For us, it's too many. We don't want more covers, it's fine. I said, I know, but I wanted to test if you will like it, because sitting so far away sometimes from other people ends up in a restaurant feeling not as vibrant, There's something very energizing when you go to these small, compact spaces and you're literally sat into someone else's face. But I think you go out to eat and drink because you want to be social. Otherwise, you stay home. You want to feel like you're surrounded by other people. It's part of the experience. So I said to them, I'm slightly concerned that these big distances will create something that hasn't got that ambience, that energy, that vibrancy. And the restaurant we're creating there is Italian food, and we're trying to emulate these very, very all-day, fast-paced kind of Italian spaces. So I said to them, that will not feel authentically Italian if I'm sat so far away. And thankfully, the client looked at it and said, you're right, we need to do that. You're absolutely right. We need to challenge what's the norm in Hong Kong, because same as other places in the world, privacy is quite important. So usually they have a lot more gaps between tables than what we have in London. But at the same time, if you want to get an authentic Italian European experience, then we need to challenge that slightly and get people to come a bit closer and get the buzz of a typical Italian Campari bar, a typical gelateria where you're squashed together, a typical kind of pizza place, and we want to get that energy. So we showed the extreme, and now we're working on the final version, which is almost like somewhere in between the two, because the client said, I appreciate what you want to do, but at the same time, we can't push it too far where people get a bit angry and alienated. So it's really interesting. We're starting a project now in LA, which is our first project in the States. And I said to the client, the space is 8,000 square feet. Are you looking to get smaller spaces in the future, so that I understand where the project will go in the future as it grows? And they said, we'll be taking smaller spaces, really small spaces. I said, really, how small? And they said 5,000 square feet. I was like, this is still gigantic, But in the States, 5,000 is quite small, So you really need to get your head around the cultural element, the privacy element, what the market needs and wants. This is critical wherever you're working, whether you're in Mayfair or in I don't know, Manchester, in any part of the UK. You really need to understand who you're talking to. To me, you're not designing for yourself. That's the great thing about commercial design. You're not designing a private house. You're designing for the audience. The audience you serve this audience. You have to serve this audience. You have to understand them. The same way the staff, the front of house staff, have to serve people great food. You as a designer have to serve them a great experience that they're going to enjoy and like. And that to me is paramount.
And so what's one of the, would you say best, or what's your best food experience recently? And I don't just mean the food, I mean the whole kind of experience. What would you say has really kind of ticked the boxes for you? And I mean that as in the whole experience, the food, the service, the interior? What has really wowed you recently?
And the most recent, I have to say, was a place we went out in Hong Kong, which has just opened. It's a French restaurant called Louise, and it's designed by Andre Fou. And it's in the space that Jason Atherton's Aberdeen Social used to be.
Okay.
So the ground floor hasn't changed much. It's a bit similar to Aberdeen Social, so it's not really moved. But the first floor, and I think actually it's nice that the downstairs hasn't changed, because you walk in and you're not immediately impressed. You think, oh, that's not what I expected. It looks a bit like Aberdeen Social. But then you walk upstairs and it's this beautiful open plan room, very slightly colonial, but in a kind of cool and contemporary way, with these massive balconies, and you can imagine really beautiful fans and warm weather, and the windows were all open. And they do classic French cooking, but in quite an experimental, cool Asian way.
Okay.
So it was a really, their signature dish is this roast chicken, which is presented stuffed with rosemary, which is all burning. So they bring it out and you have all the smoke of the rosemary.
Did you Instagram this?
No, I don't Instagram.
I may have seen this on Instagram.
Probably.
It
It just
bell.
opened a few weeks ago, so it's probably getting a lot of attention. The chicken comes out, but it almost looks like Daddle's duck. It's all shiny, beautiful skin. And they bring it to the table, and then they have this beautiful Asian rice. They take the skin off and they mix the rice with the skin, and then they serve you the duck meat on its own, which is just beautifully moist. So you have this slight weird, how can I say, confusion in your head, because part of it tastes a bit Asian, the rice with the skin, but also it's very classic French with the rosemary and the chicken. But you know what I really loved about it? That I think that was the reason I remember it as a very positive experience. It reminded me, and I think it all goes back to memory. Food is about memories. You create memories every time you eat, and it also brings memories. It reminded me of my grandmother's chicken. You know, it had this very wholesome, homey feel. It wasn't. It looked fancy, but it tasted not fancy. It tasted like my grandma's chicken. You know, like really warm and cuddly type of food. And we went with some friends, and although the environment was quite Instagrammable and fancy, and the service was quite fancy, which is not my cup of tea, I have to say, it's not me. When I ate it, I thought I actually really love it because it's humble food. It's the food that my grandma would do on a sad Sunday. She would, take the juice and make chicken soup. So we'd have the chicken soup out of the stock, and then she would have this really moist chicken with rice, and she would mix the rice. It's a very Greek thing. You mix the rice with fried hare's angels, vermicelli. So you have the crispy part and the butter, because it's all fried in butter, like the burnt butter, and then the soft rice. And that rice reminded me of that, because it had this fatty, crispy skin, like all broken into what was really moist, kind of stodgy rice. And it really reminded me of that. And it was very stocky and like chickeny. And I thought, this takes me back to my childhood. And I think, to me, I remember the places where I had an emotional experience like that, where it reminded me of something else. It brought me back to somewhere else. And this, I've been to really great restaurants, Michelin starred restaurants, and I tend to forget them because I didn't have that. And I could have gone to the most simple place and had this emotional connection which stays with me. And my partner always asks, how do you remember what you had 25 years ago? I would remember the day I had it, what it was, how it looked, because it stays with you. I think that's what I love about the world of food. It's probably one of the most powerful experiences we have on a daily basis.
Yeah, no, I agree. So you touched on a few things there that are really interesting. First of all, the whole idea of kind of emotional engagement.
Yeah.
And I would say that's becoming, especially for us, I guess what we do 12 diners at a table.
Yeah.
For us, it's super important, this idea of taking people on a journey of flavors, but also taking them on kind of an emotional journey. So everything from, obviously, the positive ones, enjoyment, laughter, all those critically important to a good dining experience. But we've also started exploring things like fear and disgust and some of the kind of lesser
Really?
known, or kind of the emotions that get tapped into slightly less when it comes to people really just understanding their relationship with food. Because if you think about it, there's all sorts of things with food that people are afraid of, that people are disgusted by, and that you can kind of tap into these emotions. Of course, at the end of the day, everything has to taste delicious and everything has to be really enjoyable, but that doesn't stop from being, or doesn't stop us at least, from just getting people to tap into those emotions, making the kind of highs higher in some way, if that makes sense. And what can be done? Because I'm just thinking now, as you were talking about that, I was thinking kind of like in terms of the future of designing restaurant experiences, not designing restaurants, but the future of designing restaurant experiences. How could we, and this is really, it's more of a kind of open question in more sense, but how could design be a part of that kind of designing experiences that are more emotionally engaging in some way? Because I think that's I do feel that's the direction that we're going in more and more. If you want to really engage people and you want to immerse them in an experience, they have to be emotionally immersed. If you're not engaging them emotionally, they're not going to be really immersed into the experience. That's what makes kind of like, I don't know, your Disney Worlds or Universal Studio experiences so
powerful.
Engaging and powerful, exactly, and memorable, and it's because it does more than just kind of take you on a ride. It engages you. It brings out fear and laughter and enjoyment and all of these emotions.
I think design can do that. I think it's got the tools to do that as a sector. I think the restaurant industry needs to deshackle itself from this idea, this notion that the only designer you need on a restaurant is an interior designer. I think that's part of the problem now, that the majority of people still associate creative design input on a restaurant coming directly from an interior design agency or architecture agency and nothing beyond that. They don't realize. And although our studio, for example, is multidisciplinary and we preach the opposite, there's still a whole group of people who don't even understand that. They don't get it at all. They think, but why? All I need is somebody to design the space. And it's like, yeah, great, but the space is beyond the interior design fit out. There's other things contained within that space. Who will take care of these things? Who will take care of the acoustics of the space, the soundtrack of the space? And suddenly they're like, I'll do that by myself. So do you see what I mean? The minute the industry realizes that you need a different approach and a different skill set and a different group of people to put these places together, which, as I said, it is already happening. But the minute people get it and understand it becomes common everyday practice, we will not be able to get that powerful experience. Or if it happens, it will be as a gut response rather than something that's planned and organized. And it's happening as a gut response because a lot of restaurateurs are just great creatives, and they would do it. So, you might be a great chef, you're a creative, when you set up your restaurant, how you want it to look and feel and what smell it should have. You know that. If you were to open tomorrow a restaurant, you would have a very strong vision. I'm 100% convinced. And this is the positive thing. And you would approach it in this multisensorial way, because you're immersed into this world anyhow, but any chef would, because they kind of understand that inherently. But the problem is that there's a lot of restaurants which are not created by a creative or a visionary or a chef. They're created by a hotel group or a big corporate, and there's nobody leading that, and that's where it starts falling apart. And then they think, all we need is a great interior design, and then we're sorted, and it's not enough. You really need to step up. You really need to understand that it's an experience, and to design an experience, you need a group of people, not just an interior designer. And interestingly, when we went yesterday to that standard hotel tour, we were explained about the design process, and the designer behind it is the designer of Boogie Nights, the film. Mm-hmm. So he comes from a completely different background. He actually comes from film. And when you go, the great thing about whether you like it or not, there's some people who say, I like the standard, some people who say, I don't like the standard. That's irrelevant. The one thing you feel is that it's extremely cohesive and it's extremely thought through, and it's got integrity. Whatever they wanted to communicate to you as a user, it's the experience side is really thought through on every touch point, really, really considered. I can't help but admire that. It's very, very strong. And
what do you mean by touch? Because you mentioned a word there that for me, that I picked that word up off you.
Yes.
This idea of sensory. Yeah, years ago. I remember you mentioning it, and I thought that's a great way of putting it. And it did kind of give me, it added something to my lexicon in a way.
Yes.
It gave me a word for being able to talk about, or when we were designing experiences. So what is a kind of a touch point? What's a sensory touch point?
A touch point to me is everything which adds to the whole experience. Every single element it's a touch point. Let's say you walk into this space. You start with, what's the point of arrival? That's a touch point. How does it look from the outside? That's a touch point. You go through the lift. How does this feel like? That's a touch point. You come in here. How does it feel as a space? How does it feel as an architectural element? How does it feel? How does the lighting feel? How does it smell? All of these are touch points, down to how does the table feel? How the material of it? How comfortable is the chair? How well does it climb back and forward? So what is the acoustic of the space? How does it sound? When I talk to you, can I hear myself? Does it bounce back? To myself and to the studio, we consider every element that informs that experience a touch point. It can be a very tiny element. It can be a very big element. It can be a subconscious thing. It can be a conscious thing. But in the way we view design is all these elements need to be considered and controlled to tell a cohesive story. So if the standard wants the place to feel very 90s, 70s, kind of slightly glamorous, slightly naughty and seedy because it's in King's Cross and that was what they wanted. They've achieved that because everything adds to this. And it's not far from what you guys do and what Charles does, which is all these bits come together in your head and they connect and they comprise of the final outtake that you have as a person, the final. You're talking very much about flavor. To us, it's not just flavor, but it's the whole, it's the experience. So all of this information computes in somebody's head, and it's like some of these things you're aware of and some things you're not aware of, but they all kind of, you use all this information as a human being to explain the world or the bit that you're experiencing. You use all these elements, all the senses, and I think that the problem with design is people are very obsessed with the visual aspect, and this is the bit that I find a contradiction. And you were talking about it as well a bit earlier. We were talking about experiences, and then we talk about Instagram. And to me, one contradicts the other because we're talking about creating experiences, yet we all are completely, and it's becoming more and more prominent, driven by what goes on Instagram, which is just a visual output. Currently, I don't know what will happen in the future. Instagram, you experience purely visually. You don't know how this place smells or looks or feels. You just look at the picture, and I think this is in a way contradicts the idea of creating experiences, because experience should be three-dimensional. That should be 360. It shouldn't be just about the visual element. And this is why I find your work so fascinating, because design is quite obsessed, has always been obsessed with the visual aspect, and especially now with the social media, the rise of social media is becoming more and more obsessed with the visual aspect. But design to me is a lot more than the visual aspect, is the whole senses coming together. And I remember when I started my career as a product designer, I worked for this guy, and we were designing a camera. Back then they were all analog, there was no digital camera, so it was proper putting film in a thing, and it rolled, the film rolled, and you would, if somebody's 20 years old, they've never experienced that, you would move this little slider to make sure that the film is progressing, and then you would click, and then you would do the same movement again and again. And I was in charge of making the prototype of this new design. And he said to me, you need to make the prototype to give you acoustic feedback. And I said, what do you mean? I don't get that. He said, how do you know as a consumer that once you've moved this little button, how do you know that the roll has moved? You can't open the thing because the film will burn. So how would you know that? I said, I don't know. He said, well, normally there's acoustic feedback. It would make a sound. As you moved it, it would do this tick, 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 tick. So you knew it's progressing. That wasn't on purpose. Somebody would design a little thing inside that would tick every time you moved it on purpose and give you feedback. And so I think it was probably the first time I remember in my head being exposed to the design is not just how the object looks. It's how it sounds, how it feels. And I think this is becoming, in a world that's becoming depleted sensorially, because we are very much consuming the world on 2 dimensions, on visual, through Instagram, through, Google. The analog sensorial experience is becoming more and more precious and more important. So if anything, going to a restaurant should be an even richer experience than what it looks on the picture. You should look at Instagram and say, okay, this place looks great. I'll go and check it out. But when you go in, it should be this plus more. And I think this is where we're getting it wrong in many ways, because you look at these places and you go in and you think, God, they look nothing like the picture. They actually look 10 times worse. And the experience is awful, but they just photograph really well. And I think this is where social media is affecting the experience side in a negative way. I remember we went out to many places in Hong Kong for this research we're doing, and you can see that certain parts of the world are even more advanced when it comes to social media, and especially Asia. And there are these very Instagrammable restaurants that we had seen all online. My team and I were very keen to visit them. And then we went to visit them and we're a bit like, it's awful. I would never sit there for a meal. It's awful. But it just looks, it photographs really well. So this is where consciously somebody designed something consciously to photograph well without considering the actual customer experience. And to me, that's where you're getting your priority wrong as a designer.
Well, you mentioned a word earlier that I thought was really pertinent, which is authenticity.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that now more than ever, people are really looking for authentic experiences.
Yes.
And I don't mean authentic in terms of having to, it can be a new experience, it can be a new business, but something that has you can see that the detailing, the love that's gone into it, that this is not just another business, another restaurant, another whatever it may be that's there for commercial purposes, that there is something really authentic about the offering that they have. And I think that's lacking as well these days. And I think brands and new operators are desperately looking for ways of making of bringing authenticity into what they do.
Absolutely. And I think the world, not just in our industry, is getting so saturated with new ideas that I think people start switching off much faster. So in order for them to remain engaged and switched on, you need to work a lot harder now. So authenticity or integrity is becoming more and more important to me, because the places that have got integrity, what you do has integrity, and that's why I respect it, has got a lot more chances of surviving in the long term. And you can see that with restaurants closing down much faster than they ever used to. It's because there's no real integrity in what these people do. It's all about in and out very quickly. And that worries me. It worries me in the sense that I would hate to see our designs getting ripped out after 3 years of us having created them, because you put a lot of energy in creating something, and A, is bad for the environment, so it's bad practice, but B, it also shows that it was not really designed with an idea of lasting long, and it becomes a cynical way of looking at things. Well, to me, this is a real challenge now, not just for us, but the whole industry of how do you create integrity and how do you create authenticity in order to create things that have got a long-lasting appeal. You know, I think the River Cafe, again, is a great example. It's authentic. It's not retro. It's not like it's trying to recreate something old. It's what it is, but it's got authenticity and integrity. And that's why they don't need to change it very much, because it's you go in and you feel this place has got integrity, and the design becomes beyond trends. And I think this is becoming harder and harder nowadays.
So, I mean, there's so many questions I'd love to ask you, and we've kind of gotten a roll. But if people want to experience some of the wonderful design in the restaurants that you have here in London, where should they go? Where would you?
From our
Yes,
designs,
yes.
oh God, that's a really difficult question. It depends on what they're after and what mood they're in. But people ask me, I'll change your question.
Okay, go
People
on.
ask me, which is one of my favorite projects, and it's always very hard to say this. I love this project more than the other, but I do really love what we did with the smallest project we were ever given. Is a small Greek restaurant in Soho called Souvlaki, and that's got a special place in my heart. Because it's the smallest project we've ever done. It's less than 40 square meters. We managed to get 28 covers in a tiny space. It's very, very cramped. But secondly, being Greek, it was the first time I had to disengage myself from the process completely and get my team to design it without me getting involved, because I thought this restaurant doesn't want to communicate what they do to other Greeks. They want to communicate to non-Greek people. So I need to pull myself out of it because I'm biased, and get somebody who's not biased to look at it. And it's very hard. Anybody who knows me, they know it's very hard for me to get my nose out of a project. I managed to keep myself out of it, and my team did an amazing job. I'm very proud of the result. And it got an award in 2015, 16, when we launched it as the best designed independent restaurant in the UK. For a tiny place, I felt it was great that this small couple who set this restaurant up and poured all their love and energy into it managed to get an award out of it. And it's a good example that no matter how big or small your space or your project, you can be ambitious, you can go bold, you can create something of substance on both food, on service, on design, which is what this couple did. You can go and win awards. You don't have to always have the big bags, go big, open big restaurants in really prime locations. It's going back to integrity. To me, that project has a lot of integrity because of the people behind it, because of us also respecting the project, no matter how small it was, and doing a good job out of it. And before we took on that project, it was unfortunately not profitable. We turned it into a profit-making business, and they've opened a second site, and now they're looking for
they?
Yeah.
So the first site is in
Soho, on Bateman Street, which is between Greek Street and Fleet Street.
And the name is Souvlaki?
Souvlaki. I think, if somebody wants to experience something small and cute, it's a good place to go.
Amazing. Afroditi, thank you so much for coming to the studio.
My absolute pleasure. It couldn't have been a better interview with somebody like you.
Amazing.
Thank you.